The disappearance of Hallsands. The ruined village of Hallsands lies on the coast between Kingsbridge and Dartmouth along the A379 road. You take the turn from Stokenham to get there. The ruined village still stands today to serve as a reminder of what can happen when we interfere with the sea. Early Hallsands was built between the cliffs and the sea in the 18th and 19th century. It had between 30 to 40 houses, and the inhabitants depended on fishing for a living, particularly crab fishing. Protected by the shingle beach, the village withstood the worst of the sea. Some 25 miles northwest of Hallsands lies Devonport, built around the naval dockyard it was founded to serve. As the size of the ships grew, the Admiralty decided to extend the docks, doubling them in size. In January 1896, the contract went to Sir John Jackson Limited. In August of 1896, Sir John wrote to the Board of Trade, requesting permission to dredge the shingle from along the coast between Hallsands and B-Sands. The shingle was the property of the Crown, under control of the Board of Trade below the watermark, and the Office of Woods above the watermark. Permission was granted on highly favourable terms, although the agreement did include a clause giving the board the right to cancel the licence if they believed the dredging might threaten the shoreline. Astonishing as this was, no one bothered to consult the villagers. As soon as the dredges in April 1897 appeared, they protested to their MP, Colonel Frank Mildmay. He was to become the villagers' most powerful ally in the struggle to follow. The reasons for the fishermen's protests were threefold: damage to the crab pots, disturbance of fish, and most seriously, they feared the removal of the shingle would lower the beach, threatening their homes. Following a parliamentary question from Mildmay, the Board of Trade agreed to a local inquiry. The first inquiry was in May 1897. Sir John claimed that the sea would replenish any shingle extracted. In the August of 1897, an agreement was made for Sir John to pay £125 a year to the Hallsands community for as long as any dredging continued. He also agreed to pay for any damage to pots or fishing gear. For a couple of years after this, the fishermen seemed to have accepted it. By 1900, as the fishermen had predicted, the level of the beach was falling. In the autumn storms, the sea wall washed away part of the stone wall facing the beach. In November of 1900, some property owners and Mr. Spittle, owner of the London Inn, whose property was the first to suffer, petitioned their MP complaining of the damage to their houses. Sir John replied denying responsibility, but he offered to pay for any damage his work caused, and for up to 6 months afterwards. The villagers did not respond, but in March 1901, Kingsbridge Rural District Council complained of damage to the road. In September 1901, the board appointed a new inspector, who concluded in his report that the beach had fallen by 7 to 12 feet, and, in the event of a heavy gale from the east, few houses will not be flooded, if not seriously damaged. The board then restricted the dredging, while Sir John tried to negotiate with the villagers. On New Year's Day, 1902, they took the law into their own hands, and prevented the dredgers from landing. On January 8, 1902, the licence was revoked. During 1902, the beach level recovered a little, but it was not to last, as the winter of that year brought more storms and damage. An unjust settlement was reached in April 1903. This was to build a sea-wall and compensate the owners of 6 houses that had disappeared. Little remains of those houses today. Behind the sea-wall, life carried on, although the loss of beach made fishing more difficult and the beach level continued to fall. During 1903, the storms grew worse and the tide exceptionally high. It washed and cleared away the foundations of the London Inn. By 1905, the sea-wall was completed, but some houses were destroyed by then, although some had been repaired. When war broke out in 1914, some of the men went to fight and were away when, on that extremely fateful night of January the 26th, 1917, a combination of easterly gales and exceptionally high tides breached the sea wall and Hallsands defences. As the waves and shingle hit the houses, the sea broke into the homes from under the floorboards. The villagers hung on to door frames as the waves crashed about them. They could not get out until the tide went out. The storm that night had torn the village street up. Cottages had collapsed, while others had tumbled down. It was amazing not one of the villagers died or was injured. By the 28th of January, Old Hallsands was no more. and only the few buildings at the top of the cliffs had been untouched. This left 24 families homeless. Eventually the villagers signed a £6,000 full and final settlement. But was this a fair settlement?